This is an SM Media production. Hi folks, and welcome to the latest episode of the Celtic Report right here on SM Media, your exclusive Celtic podcast. I'm Scott McPike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host as always. Just a two-man team this week. We've got a lot to talk to, a big game to recap. Obviously a big 3 points for Celtic away to Aberdeen. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show one of our best writers, Michael Shearer.
Thanks for having me again, Scott. I've enjoyed writing for the Celtic Report in the past couple of weeks.
It's an absolute pleasure. Obviously, this is gonna stick you in here. You're away on holiday this week. That's very lucky.
I'll make sure I get it now if we can during the week, though. Don't worry.
Don't you worry about that. I wish I was in your position, miles away and enjoying all inclusive weather. Let's move on to talking about the kind of big news over the weekend. Obviously, it was a big game. Celtic keep their 100% record going. Michael, we'll kind of do it over. We'll talk about the game. We'll analyse the game as a whole, but overall takeaways, certainly from my perspective, it wasn't a great performance. I don't think anybody could say it was a vintage Celtic performance, but it's those games you need to win if you're going to win the league. That's what I keep saying. I know it's 2 games in, but it was that sort of game. Aberdeen, I thought, were positive, which I don't think you can say about Aberdeen teams against Celtic a lot in the past few years, but they certainly made it difficult for Celtic. I think it was just a massive 3 points, and I think by hook or by crook, Celtic got there. Rodgers will want it to be better, but as we'll get into it and over the show, but I think you'll look back and think that's a massive 3 points at such an early stage.
I think Rodgers said that. I think he said that in the first couple of games, the most important thing is the results and not the performances. And him even saying that really shows that he's valuing that so far and just seeing that players are working as hard as possible and not the best circumstances.
That is it as well. When looking ahead to the team news, I don't think anybody was thinking. I think we kind of spoke about it as well. The only question was it going to be Hatate or was it going to be Turnbull? And I think it was very difficult to drop David Turnbull after his performance last week. But it was really the only question. I think it kind of shows you one thing as well. I think Rodgers is comfortable with the team he's got, but I think it's also he's picking players in form.
I think it's quite complicated when you think about it as a Celtic player because, for example, David Turnbull scored 2 goals last week, but then this week he was non-existent against Aberdeen, and that's life as a Celtic player. You're going to have games where you're outstanding, but then if you're not up to it in the next game, you're going to go off at half-time, and that's exactly what Rodgers did. And he's not scared to do that with players, and he showed Turnbull that you need to be on your top game no matter who you're playing.
Absolutely, yeah, and let's get into the game as a whole. It obviously started out Celtic get the early goal. The VAR check was long, but it obviously worked out in Celtic's favour. We can slate VAR, and I think we will over the course of the season. But when it works like that, that's the way it's brought in. It's been brought in to do that. It was a great ball in for O'Reilly. Don't be surprised if I mention Matt O'Reilly a lot during this show because I thought he was again just absolutely terrific. But it's a nice pick up for Abada. It's obviously, was it going in? We don't know, but I think Abada is just there. That's what he can do. That's what you want for Lila Abada. He's just at the real kind of key spots of the park. And I thought again, just that's the reason that I think he's even a big player for Celtic this year.
That's Abada in a nutshell. He's an elite goal scorer, but the rest of his game he still has to work on. But certainly getting in at the back post and getting goals, Abada is excellent at that. For somebody so young to be able to do that, it's just great. And I'm not surprised that Matt O'Reilly being involved in the goal. He's a great player, and that's not what he needs to work on his game. But he was excellent as well, Matt O'Reilly. He's starting to win me over in the past couple of games to be a first-team starter. No, I was a fan, but I mean, as a weekly starter, he had a great impact at first when he joined Celtic, but he's really been adding goals and assists, and it's just great to see.
Absolutely, yeah. Matt O'Reilly will come up a lot later on, but it didn't take long for Aberdeen to equalise. Now, I don't know what you feel about this, but I'm certainly of the opinion if Cameron Carter-Vickers is 100% fit, I don't think that happens. But it's also a good bit of play for Miovski. I think it is one of those difficult ones that it's still early. You're going to see Carter-Vickers is nowhere near fit, and I don't think as much as we'll get into Stephen Welsh and potentially a new centre half coming in, we saw at the end of last season just how important Carter Vickers is, and if he's nearly fit, he's going to play. And I just think it was one of those things where it won't happen very often. You're actually surprised when it does happen, but I just think he gets done a bit for pace, doesn't he?
At the time, I didn't think he was injured or anything. But when you think about him going off at half time, he clearly must have been carrying some injury.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not one of the players in the league you would like to go up against in Duke. He is an excellent player. And it's not too often you've seen Carter Vickers just look off the pace in a situation like that. And it clearly must have been due to injury. I don't like making excuses for players, but it must have been due to an injury he's carrying. And as you say, he's obviously not 100%. They're trying to bed him in. But in a game against Aberdeen, I think they did have to do that because Aberdeen were excellent towards the end of last season, and Celtic knew at the second game of the season in the league, that's such a tough game to go, and you need your best players like Carter Vickers. And even if it's only 45 minutes, you needed them.
Yeah, and it's one of those you thought maybe at the time kind of Aberdeen were pressing a lot. I did think Celtic's defence in a bit of a difficult afternoon. We'll come on to one player in particular. I thought a really difficult afternoon, but Aberdeen were kind of grew into the game. Obviously got the goal. It's the thing is obviously Devlin makes a howler, but it isn't just the fact that Nicky Devlin, the header's a terrible header, but again, it's Kyogo's reaction. He's so quick to just be alert, get on it, and not only is that a terrific reaction, it's a terrific finish as well to put Celtic back in front.
I think Kyogo's went to another level. When I think of him last season, there was a spell in the Champions League. He was missing a lot of chances. And then later, towards the end of the season, he scored so many goals against Rangers. He's becoming even more clinical than he was when he first joined Celtic. And it's so apparent that he's every chance he's really working the goalkeeper if it's not going in. And that's when it doesn't go in. He's really went to another level, and it's very clear to see. And I'm looking forward to see him in the Champions League because I think he'll get goals this season, unlike last year.
What really has caught my eye, and we spoke about it last week, was he is coming deeper. Yeah, you are seeing. Obviously, last week he played he came back and I played the pass for O'Reilly, but maybe not so much on Sunday. But you did see in times he was kind of coming back in. He was freeing up O'Reilly. It brings such a different dimension to Celtic. It's obviously one that Rodgers clearly wants to bring in O'Reilly further forward. You saw Maeda and Abada, they were able to cut in a bit more. It just brings such a different dimension.
Yeah, that's one thing about Rodgers. They want to work in that part of Kyogo's game. Maybe Ange just wants them to run in behind, and that is his strength. But with Rodgers as a manager, he's going to work on every aspect of your game and improve that. And I certainly believe even players that last season we all thought were certain starters, Rodgers will pick pieces and he'll speak to them one to one. He'll explain how they can get better and I imagine he'll even talk about what he's done in the past with players like Luis Suarez and how he's improved them. And players will enjoy that.
The thing is, obviously, Celtic should have been probably out of sight by half time, just a couple of chances. I think Keldus does really well to keep Aberdeen in the game, but half time, were you surprised that? I don't think we were surprised with Carter Vickers. Turnbull hardly kicked the ball, and I think that is the kind of difference. Like, obviously, Welsh come on, we'll get into him in a minute, but were you surprised the changes were made?
I wasn't. I was more surprised about Carter Vickers because I wasn't sure how bad the injury was and if he was going to carry on. But with Turnbull, to see him do that, maybe I was surprised it was done at half time, but certainly wasn't surprised he was taken off because he was really non-existent. He wasn't really adding anything, and he's possibly supposed to be the most advanced midfielder, creating things, getting on the ball, sending players forward. But Matt O'Reilly was doing that, and Turnbull just kind of looked lost. He was getting dispossessed, passes going astray, losing the ball. In a game like that, that's what David Turnbull really needs to work on his play because he's not going to get that space that he got against Ross County.
Let's move into the second half. One thing Aberdeen were doing was they were making it difficult for Celtic. I thought Greg Taylor struggled all afternoon. The boy Morris, I thought, was giving him a difficult time. Callum McGregor was dispossessed a few times, and Aberdeen were just making it difficult. And I think Greg Taylor, I don't know about you, but there's chat tonight of a left back that we'll get into when we talk about transfers. But I think Bernabe clearly can be trusted. That's one thing I think we'll come to the conclusion of. That's another example of just we saw today as well. it's not looking good for Bernabei. But I don't think Rodgers already, I think I've come to this conclusion, I don't think he sees Greg Taylor as a long-term left-back. And maybe in a ways he's not, but he's always been very serviceable. It's not very often we're talking about Greg Taylor getting exposed, but I thought he was exposed pretty bad by the boy Morrison.
I feel like against the best opposition, Greg Taylor will get exposed. Maybe
Yeah.
not on a weekly, maybe not on a weekly basis, but 1v1 against pacey wingers, he is going to get exposed because that's not his strength. He likes to go into the middle of the park. He likes to play 1-2s, pass the ball around. But if he's up against a pacey winger who's on their game, specifically Aberdeen at home, the fans behind them, Greg Taylor's going to struggle in that situation. And with Rodgers' adaptations that he's made, Greg Taylor looks like one of the most flawed players on the side. And I don't think he could have said this last season. And it's quite unfortunate to see for Greg Taylor because he certainly gave his all when he's been at Celtic. He's been criticised and he's came through that and he scored big goals like he did against Rangers in a game under Ange. So you can see that he was one of Ange's players, but it doesn't look like he's one of Rodgers' players.
Well, we've obviously been thinking about Hatate, like there maybe has been kind of some issues, but he brought such a perfect balance into the midfield. I thought when he came on, obviously he didn't last very long with his injury, but you could see just that when he's there, just he brings such a level of calmness. And I think McGregor needed it in particular because I thought McGregor really struggled the first half.
I feel like you will see when Hatate's playing now, you're going to see him dropping deeper and collecting the ball. That is one of his strengths. Celtic fans don't always talk about that because he has scored big goals, but he's also great at dropping deep and collecting the ball. With McGregor getting pressed so highly by Aberdeen, he had a tough job. He was losing the ball, and it's not often you see that happen to Carl McGregor. And you do need a player like Hatate to help with that. O'Reilly has his strengths as well. He was trying his best to help, but Hatate was certainly the right substitution. You are right to bring him on because he can drop deep, drop the shoulder, play those passes.
Len, obviously Aberdeen. I thought Aberdeen were pretty good actually. I thought they were a lot more positive, as they say. They kind of pressed Celtic a lot more than they probably thought they would. But they had a couple of chances, and it was big kind of moments. Like I thought Nawrocki had a good game. I thought Ralston was pretty serviceable as well. And it turned out to be a big afternoon for those two in particular. Welsh, I thought, brought a good balance as well. And Aberdeen, I can see why there's a lot of positivity about Aberdeen this season.
They haven't got the results so far, but certainly throughout the season, they probably will definitely finish high up the table, but maybe not third. But I'm excited to see how they do under Robson. They've got some great players, Miovski and Duke. As long as they can keep them, they'll be two of the best players in the league outside of Celtic. And those two just link up so well with Duke's pace and that running in behind. I think there was even one situation I remember Duke can pass McGregor, and it's not often you see a player get past Callum McGregor with such ease.
Yeah, no, certainly not. And Kyogo obviously had another chance. I thought Hatate played a really good ball and he's unlucky not to get it a bit lower. Devlin does really well to prevent a Maida challenge, but I made a chance. And I thought Dyson Maida was unlucky actually throughout the afternoon. He was getting his cell. He played a lot better than he did last weekend. I thought last weekend he was off it, but it's a lot better this weekend for Maida, I thought.
Yeah, he's a great player, Dyson Maeda. He's got that pace. He just really needs to work on sometimes his technical ability, and that will help him get maybe more assists and more goals with link-up play. Sometimes his decision making is lacking, but that will be worked on. You can't question Dyson Maeda's work rate for Celtic, and that's one of the most important things about being a Celtic player, giving your all for the jersey.
We'll talk. I think with Celtic's depth, we'll talk a lot about subs throughout the season, but I thought Holm brought in such a difference. I think I really like what I see from Odin Holm. I think he could be a really good signing. And Yang, again, we saw a glimpse of him against Ross County, just how direct he can be. But with bringing them on with 20 minutes to go, Holm, I thought, obviously he kind of tidied up a lot of Hatate going off. I don't think Celtic were down because he came on. I thought he did really well. You can see he's got technical talent. It's his midfield pace I quite like as well. He can make the kind of wee bursts that I think you really need to have to be a good midfielder, particularly at a club like Celtic. And start with Holm. I really liked him. I really like him so far.
His physicality as well. There was a few headers that he won, and that's not something that I looked at him and I thought, oh, he's going to win those headers. He's not the smallest player, but he's certainly got great aerial threat as well in the middle of the park. And Celtic needed that in this game. And as you rightly pointed out, when he had that wee burst of pace, he went past players, and it was in the wide area as well. So that opened up play. down the left-hand side for wingers to go inside. And he looked so comfortable on the ball. It's a hard game to go, Aberdeen away, one of the best teams in the league. And to come on for Celtic, you've just joined the club in the summer, but he looked excellent.
And then we'll get into Yang. We've seen glimpses of Yang. I think Celtic could have I think with Yang, there is obviously a real player in there, and he's direct, and he does really well for the goal. He's going to be a player, I think, that's going to be kind of off and on, but when he's on, he could be really good. We've seen enough already to say there's a real talent there.
I think it's his playmaking that's going to be the most important thing. He's maybe not as much a goal scorer as someone like, say, Haksabanovic, who just wants to shoot every time. That was excellent wing play to get that ball to O'Reilly. The drop of the shoulder, the ball, the vision. It's everything you want to see in a Celtic player. The selflessness to get the ball to O'Reilly. It was just such a great pick out. I didn't see that coming in that situation because there was so many Aberdeen players around him, and you're like, what can he do here to get the ball to a Celtic player? And he just done it excellently. And he's been playing more off the right-hand side, but that was off the left-hand side he done that. I feel that was the most impressive thing to see because it shows he's quite flexible in playing either wing.
Last week we saw Matt O'Reilly come up just when the game was a bit nervy, but again we saw just what he can bring. All afternoon he was everywhere. O'Reilly is you obviously touched on it as well, and it was something I kind of spoke about when we were doing the podcast. I've just thought with O'Reilly just coming in, I think Rodgers really likes that kind of player who can do a lot in midfield. I think he can. Matt O'Reilly's still very young. We need to realise that. And I think Rodgers will take him on as a project. We've already seen he's making long busting runs. He's technically the way he's putting balls in. The two finishes the past two games have been really good. I love Matt O'Reilly. I think Matt O'Reilly is special.
Yeah, so did I. But when he really came to Celtic, he set the bar so high for himself. And I think that's maybe been the problem in the last year, that in his first 6 months at Celtic, he was just so excellent. And I wrote the piece for the Celtic Report, and I was just covering Matt O'Reilly's time at Celtic. And the only thing that has frustrated me is goals, but he certainly shut me up in the past two games with 8 goals. If he adds those goals, he's going to be in the starting 11 every week, and it's going to be him and Callum McGregor, and that third position's up for grabs. I don't see anybody displacing him this season in the Celtic squad the way he's playing. He's been absolutely excellent. His work rate, his defensive work rate, going forward, these dribbles, his passes to get out of tight situations. He was progressing the ball to Abada quite a lot in the first half, and it was very important for Celtic to do that when Aberdeen were pressing very highly.
And he just brings that. You can just see that he's kicking on. He's one of those players that we did think that he would kick on under Rodgers, and as you say, just it sometimes goes under the radar. Just that he does put in a shift in terms of defensive work rate. You look at Celtic, and Celtic don't play with that necessarily defensive midfielder, but when you've got O'Reilly that can do it, you've got McGregor, Hatate can do it as well. I think is another one who'll get in about it as well. There's a lot of nice balance, and it's a problem that you want now. You've got at least 5 players now that are top quality going for 3 positions now. As you say, McGregor, I think, is the one that McGregor, you would say Hatate on his best day, absolutely. But O'Reilly's the other one that you're just thinking it's been an early start of just how I think just we spoke about it last week, just the arm round the shoulder that Rodgers gives. I don't think Postecoglou gave that. Not to say that Postecoglou is remarkable, but I just think Rodgers, with O'Reilly in particular, I look at a couple more, maybe like a Turnbull, I'm thinking maybe like a Ralston, just the Welsh, for example. Arm round the shoulder, just an arm round them, just to kind of G them up when they're not having that best of form. And it makes such a difference, and you're seeing that already. I think Rodgers is the man for O'Reilly at the moment.
I did also remember last season when McGregor was injured that Matt O'Reilly did play as the more holding midfielder and the midfield three, and he was not out of place in Champions League games. He did play that position. Yeah. And he certainly wasn't at fault. He kind of held that midfield together for Celtic at points last season before McGregor came back into the side. And I don't forget that. I felt sorry for him because after that, he was expected to be maybe the most advanced midfielder, and it's a struggle to go for being holding midfielder, the attacking midfielder within a couple of games. And towards the end of the season, he had a great performance against Rangers, and it wasn't his best season, but I really am excited for him this year. He's looking like one of the top players at Celtic. in the first 2 games.
What do you think as well? Like these, we've looked at it and obviously said like there is a level of continuity bringing Rodgers back in, but it wasn't necessarily like there was a lot of players, and I know it was kind of something that we looked at earlier, but it was something where that's not necessarily perfect at the moment. And I'm not saying Rodgers obviously gets on way, Postecoglou's gets on way, but right now you've got that kind of middle of the road where you don't really know what the balance is. There's times where I thought in midfield in particular, Celtic failed to control the game, and it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a difficult few weeks until the balance gets right. But it's one of those things that Rodgers will be desperate to work on. He'll want to make his own impact. Right now, you've got a lot of Ange players who play with that high intensity. They're now trying to get it back into a kind of different approach. I see at times going back into the two, like maybe O'Reilly kind of working back, kind of playing in that kind of where like Beaton and Brown would play, just for example. Not to say that they're the same type of player, but that's what Rodgers did. He had the two, and then he had somebody further forward. But that is something that was missing. I thought at times. I thought there was a wee bit of kind of lack of balance in the midfield, and I thought at times Aberdeen capitalised on that.
I feel like there is less structure under Rodgers. There's more freedom, and players like O'Reilly enjoy that because they're such talented players with technical ability. But when you look at maybe Carol Starfelt and Greg Taylor, that's 2 players that knew exactly what they were doing under Ange. I feel like Ange was more precise in the way he wanted players to play the instructions. At times, it didn't look like Greg Taylor would know what he was needed to do in this game going forward, who he was giving the ball to, was it to go down the wing. Whereas a player like Matt O'Reilly, he knows that position so well. I'm not saying Greg Taylor doesn't know the position, but it's not as structured. It's a bit more fluid than Postecoglou, who was very set in his ideals. And some players have fell victim to that, whereas others have capitalised on it and enjoyed it. And I think that's the most clear thing. But it's only 2 games into the season. I can't really label that criticism at Celtic under Rodgers too much because it's just so early in the season, and we will see changes, and there's still weeks left in the window. So I'm excited to see what it will be going forward.
It is a big win. It wasn't the best performance. I think Rodgers will want to kind of sharpen it up. It's obviously going to be quite helpful that the League Cup game's not till next Sunday, so it gives them enough time to get it right in the training ground. But it was a good result, and it's one of those wins that as I say, you'll look back on, and if Celtic are to go and win this league, they're games that will be remembered.
Yeah, certainly. It was a great win. How many times have Celtic really performed greatly Aberdeen away, I would say, to be honest, over the years? Like it's not the type of game you're going to win 3-0 or something. It's going to be a tough, rounded out game. And up until the last 10 minutes of the game, when the game was out of bed, Celtic were closely contested against Aberdeen. And it's a great result, considering it's Ellen Rodgers' spell. And he knows that himself, Rodgers. He's not going to be too critical of the players and the performance to Aberdeen away. I don't think many managers would be, to be honest. It was under the circumstances, the side and everything, it was just a great result. And Aberdeen were certainly up for the game. I think we have to give Aberdeen plaudits, despite not getting a great result last week. But this week they were certainly up for the game.
Yeah,
and they'll be a team to watch this season, Aberdeen.
Yeah, I think they will as well. I think they've got a nice balance in their squad. I think they're clearly going to play with a 3. I don't think that helped Celtic either because I don't think there was a lot of space for. But when Celtic get clinical players the way they do, they getting the early goal. We spoke about it a lot last season. I think the early goal was massive again this week, and just getting the lead before half time. It goes in. It gets it's scoring at the right times, and then obviously a late goal, which it's a key Celtic trait. A lot of kind of gossip coming out after the game. Transfers will probably take about half an hour to go through everything, but the big obviously talking point was Stephen Welsh obviously coming on at half time, and I thought he did well. And there's obviously been talk for at least a year that maybe kind of Serie A would be mooted for Stephen Welsh, but Rodgers he's kind of taking him under his wing in terms of he clearly sees a place for him. Now it might not be. I don't think we're going to see Stephen Welsh play 40-50 games for Celtic this season, but he's certainly one that Rodgers feels he can improve. And I've always said with Brendan Rodgers, that is one thing he is unbelievable at. It's bringing players up. It's helping players who maybe you would think Celtic maybe won't. You maybe won't see him to best effect, but Rodgers can take him on. I'll look at somebody like Stuart Armstrong, even Lustig, for example. Rodgers just got a lot more out of them. And I think Stephen Welsh is another one that he maybe sees as that kind of player he can do it with. And I'm not necessarily surprised at that, because I think Stephen Welsh can play a big part, but it's one that I think it's needed somebody like Rodgers to come in and go, right, I want to make him my pet project, and I think it's something Rodgers is keen to do.
Well, Steve Welsh, he's the Scotland under-21 captain. He has been good at Celtic. He's been stable. And I can only count the bad performances he's had for Celtic in one hand, and there's not been too many. And he's had injuries. That's the only criticism I'd probably label it Welsh. He's missed a number of games due to that. But under Rodgers, he can certainly go to the next level. But he will be tested in Europe. I feel like that's where we're really going to look at Stephen Welsh.
Mm-hmm.
In a game against Aberdeen away, that was also a great test for him. It's games like that we can really judge him, when he's going to be tested against a good opposition in front three. Miovski and Duke, he didn't give him a look in. He's not the tallest player in the world, Stephen Welsh, so he's got to just read the game well in the air, when to put his head in, win the ball, and he done excellent in the second half. Aberdeen didn't really look like scoring when he came on, and if you were really looking at the game and you said Carter Vickers was to go off and be replaced by Stephen Welsh, I think Celtic fans would be quite nervous, but he didn't really give it away. I wasn't concerned when he was on it. To be honest, I didn't really notice him, and I think that's a credit to a player as a defender when they come on and you don't really think of them. It was more you're thinking about Celtic going forward. He looks stable, and Nawrocki as well. I think Nawrocki looks excellent.
I was going to touch
he
on
looks
that, yeah.
He looks like more. I was trying to think how I describe him. He's more like an Ayer, the way he goes forward with the ball. And he's played a lot as a left centre back. And I think that's very important, because when Carol Starfelt joined the club, he actually joined before Ange. And that meant that Starfelt was being moved to the left centre back position, which he hadn't played much before. So a player like Nawrocki, he's played there and he's capable of playing on his weaker foot with the ball. I think it's going to be an upgrade in that position. And with Welsh as well, he's going to contest for that position, because I don't feel he's uncomfortable on his left foot as well, Stephen Welsh. So it's very exciting, and we probably will see another signing in the coming days.
Yep, absolutely. I want to just touch on Nawrocki. Like, he obviously got interviewed before the game, and you were hearing about, obviously, like there was talk, obviously, that he can play as a kind of holding midfielder. But one thing that impressed me about him is when Carter Vickers went off at half time, you did wonder, is Nawrocki and Welsh, is it too young a partnership for that type of game? But I thought Nawrocki, just the way he kind of handled it, he looked more the senior pro. You could see him kind of just being the calm influence in that. I think that helped Welsh, but I think that's something with Nawrocki that we associate Carter Vickers with being that kind of player who holds everything in the defence. But Nawrocki looks quite good at it as well.
What made me laugh was one of the situations. It looked like Miovski had run away from him and he'd outpaced him, but then he just caught up with him.
Yeah.
With ease. And then the next situation, Miovski didn't get a look in. So I feel like he was trying to look out Miovski and see what he was trying to do. And some Celtic fans I've seen on Twitter were quite worried about his pace, but then later in the game he showed he has that pace. I don't think he's as fast as Starfelt, because Starfelt was very fast, but he's aggressive, and we need the aggressive centre back like him to win those headers, win the ball first time on the ground as well, to get Celtic up the pitch. He's great at progressing the ball. I really noticed that about him. He's bringing the ball forward, get Celtic further up the pitch. Because at times with Starfelt, we did struggle with that as well, against tougher oppositions like Aberdeen, getting the ball up the pitch into the left-hand channel, and he'd done that very well in the game.
Yep, absolutely. Let's move into some transfer gossip. There is quite a fair bit that's come through today, actually. First bit of business that looks like it's going to be happening in the next couple of days. Gustav Lagerbielke. Now, that might not be the best pronunciation. It will get better over the course of the season, I assure you that. But it looks as if he's going to come in from Elfsborg. Clearly, maybe not a like-for-like Carl Starfelt replacement, but just another player in that area, which I think will do no harm. There's something about this signing. I know you wrote a piece about him, a really clear piece as well. He could bring something. You just look at him like I watch the classic YouTube clips, but there's something about him for set pieces. He's good with the ball at his feet. There's a lot to like here, and it's going to be a big kind of thing for him. I think that partnership of Carter Vickers and Nawrocki already looks difficult to break up, but he's going to come in with that in mind. He wants to be a starter.
I think Celtic need a centre back that can score goals for set pieces.
I would totally agree with that.
they've missed that since Julian left. And despite Starfelt being one of probably the best aerial players I've seen in the box for Celtic, defensively, attacking he wasn't as good. And Celtic need that player, particularly in a European occasion, because I remember seasons back with Julian getting those big goals for set pieces. Celtic need that advantage against greater oppositions to get that goal, because sometimes they've struggled to get goals, and a player like him is going to add that, certainly. And defensively, he's going to be a great player. He's so young, potential. I feel like when you look at some of the players that Celtic have let go, they've let go of Giacomakis, they've let go of Juranovic, and now they've let go of Starfelt. When you look at their ages, they're somewhat the older players that was on the Celtic side, and they've replaced them with younger players. You can only really look at Kyogo as one of the older players now at Celtic. The average age is just slowly decreasing even more, and I think that's a good thing for Celtic, because they made profits on those players and they've brought in younger, fresher players. He's also taller than Starfelt, and I think that's important. He's even more aerially imposing, because when you've got a player like Carter Vickers, he's not really aerially imposing. Physically, he is, but he's just going to bring another dimension to the Celtic side. And I do feel like at times we might see a back three in Europe. Rodgers did do that in his first spell at Celtic, and it's quite exciting.
I think this is going to be one, and I think it shows, and we'll get into this with the kind of talk of the left back position. But again, I think with Nawrocki, one thing that caught my eye is it's a player you can develop and sell for a large fee. It's something Celtic are so good at, and this is another example of that. And again, I really like it. I really like the signing. I think going for the young market and that the Scandinavian market, I think, so untouched. Again, it just shows the eye of, right, we might only have this player for 2 or 3 years, but if we can develop him, if we can do everything we need him to do, he's going to, not only is he going to be a very serviceable player for Celtic, he's going to make Celtic a lot of money.
The question I have is, seeing Rodgers' first spell, how many of these signings was there? There was Moussa Dembele, and that was already going on in the background since January that year. Rodgers didn't have players like this joining the club when he was there. He really just kept the same players. But Celtic's adding young, youthful players with good experience in top leagues, and it's very exciting to just see players like this joining the club, because Rodgers is a great manager and he's going to develop them even more. And it's just so exciting, because it looks like the sky's the limit for Celtic with these players, because the fees aren't too high when you consider the fees that Celtic have spent on players.
One big bit of news that came out today was the potential. Certainly, this would maybe help the homegrown situation, but it's not a signing that I really think would excite the Celtic support. Celtic seem to be interested in former Aberdeen and current Newcastle winger Ryan Fraser. I don't know about this one. I can see the positives of it, but I can also see this is a player who on his day, yes, has done very well. He's done very well at Bournemouth, but Arsenal not willing to pay 50 million for him or something at one point. But there's also in the background a player who has clearly been the past couple of seasons, it's not been 100% in terms of on the park and off the park. I think when you look at a Jota replacement, I think Celtic fans want a marquee fee. I don't know how much Ryan Fraser is going to cost, if he's going to cost anything, if Newcastle just want rid of him, because it wouldn't surprise me. I don't see how he fits into a Newcastle team now, watching them on Saturday. But this one, yes, I can see the pros of it, but I can see a lot of cons as well.
I feel like there is something to this rumour though, because this
So
did pop up around a month ago, didn't it? And now it's came back.
It's certainly been there's certainly been talk of it, but I think this is certainly the most serious it's been.
Yeah, it'd be a very interesting signing, because as you said, there is pros. He has been a good player in his career, particularly at Scotland at times. When I watched him, he was great for Scotland. As you say, the quota is probably the most important part of it. Him being a Scottish player, add another player for the Champions League. People sometimes forget how important that is, because you actually need to make those quotas. Homegrown players came through youth academies and stuff. And did he not come through at Aberdeen, didn't he? So that would be important. He's not a bad player, and at the level in Scotland, we'd need to see how he would come up. But there has been players that have came from the English Premier League and not done too well. At his age, is not around 30 years old for a winger. It's not the greatest age, to be honest. I heard some people comparing him to James Forrest because they feel like those two players are quite similar with Ryan Fraser and that. I don't even know how much pace he still has, because he was quite a player who relied on pace, and that's not
Yeah,
always the best thing you
he's
want to
played.
see.
He's played 8 games last season.
So his injury record's not good, and that's
Not
something that
not just
on you go.
injury
Sorry.
record. I think not just injury record. I think match sharpness. I think you're going into a Celtic team where the one thing you need to be is on it. You need to be sharp. You need to be quick. And yes, at 29, and now he can still play a role. He's obviously he's a terrific talent. He is. He's done really well where he's been. He's did really well at Bournemouth. Did really well at Aberdeen. I understand it, but I would have concerns about the level. Just not the level, but I don't think he's the Jota replacement. I don't think he's anywhere near. I think one thing Celtic are going to miss this season if they don't get somebody like this as a flair player. I know Abada can obviously is very direct. Maeda's obviously get the work rate. Kyogo's dropping back, but I'm still looking at Celtic the other day and thinking Jota's flair, his technique, his ability to create space. Ryan Fraser certainly isn't going to be that type of player.
I do feel that Marco Tilio is the player that will add that,
Could
to be
be.
honest. When I watch him, and I've watched highlights of him, he looks like that sort of player, and he's still to come back. With Ryan Fraser, for balance, I will say though that how many people would have said Aaron Moy would have done so much last season,
That's the thing.
replacing
Yeah.
Tom Rogic?
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I don't know. Whilst if Newcastle go, you can have them relatively cheap because I don't think Newcastle are struggling for cash. I don't think they'll be one to. I don't think they'll be hard to play ball with. I think they'll be quite happy to sell them, to be honest, for a relatively cheap price. It's if that cheap price is worth it for Celtic because, as you say, he is 29. You can look at maybe a 22, 23-year-old winger coming from a league. Celtic have obviously been into the Polish market, they've been into the Norwegian market, Swedish market. There's a lot of markets out there that Celtic can go and get a £5-6 million winger who can bring a lot more and be not just obviously be good for 2 or 3 years, but you can sell him on. You're not going to sell Ryan Fraser on. That's the thing. If Ryan Fraser's the answer, then you've got to trust Brendan Rodgers. But I see the negatives of. I think every signing Celtic should be making right now is with a view to the future and how you can sell. And with Ryan Fraser, I don't think that would be the answer.
The only thing I might say is maybe in Europe he would maybe make a difference with his pace in that, but in the league he's not going to make too much of a difference because Celtic's going to be playing against captain oppositions and stuff. So it might be for that. I do have reservations over the signing, but I'm not going to label him anything just yet because for Aaron Moy last season, I wasn't too excited for that signing, and by the end of the season, he had a great season for Celtic. At his age, he contributed so much. So it's still to be seen how Ryan Fraser would do at Celtic. So I think we'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I think if he's a free agent, then I can totally see it, but I don't know if the fee will be right. One rumour that's coming out today that I can very much get behind is the potential of Quentin Merlin from Nantes. He's a left back, under 21 international for France. He's played 2 seasons in Ligue 1. I think this is going to be one that will be a hefty fee. I think obviously we spoke about it. Greg Taylor. I don't think I think we'll get into Bernabé. I don't think Bernabé is going to be reliable long term. I don't think Greg Taylor certainly is one that Brendan Rodgers feels is going to be a long term thing. Quentin Merlin, certainly, I think he's only 21. He's going to cost a few quid. If Celtic are serious about this, I think this could be a real good signing. But again, it's going to cost a lot of money.
It is one of those ones with the sources, not how reliable is it? It
Yeah.
seems like it's been started on Twitter, and sometimes that it does happen, but it doesn't look like it's the most reliable sources and stuff. So I think that if Celtic were to get him, as you say, they would need to spend money, and it is a position they upgrade. But will Celtic want to do that in Europe because there's a couple of weeks left of the window, and when I'm looking at things, Celtic seem to spend money later, but I feel that is due to when see these really top players that just add to the side. Sometimes you need to wait for a move to fall through so you can jump in and get them. Because with players like Yakimakis, they done that in Andrew's first season. They got him in deadline day, and that must have been down to some moves falling through.
Let's move into potential outgoings. One player who could be on the way out is Benjamin Segrest. It's apparent, and this was something you actually brought up to me. I didn't know anything about this. That Seagrass potentially, he does want to go out and look for first team football. I think with the chat of a new goalkeeper, which we will kind of finish the show on, he sees his future in Australia. Whether he goes to Australia, I don't know, but I think we can certainly come to the conclusion that Benjamin Seagrass isn't going to get much action at Celtic, and I think probably a move is the best outcome.
It was interesting when I was doing some research on this, that this quote actually came from him doing a photo shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was discussing his partner that he met in Australia when Celtic were playing in Australia, which is great for him, but he's not really had a look in at Celtic. He got some time in pre-season, but that's usually when most goalkeepers get some game time. He's not pushed Joe Hart. He was an excellent goalkeeper. I remember watching Celtic play Dundee United, and he just kept Dundee United in the game for over 90 minutes. And Celtic did win the game in the end, but Seagrass was excellent. But it's a different standard when you play for Celtic. You're expected to save maybe one or two shots a game in massive situations. Where at Dundee United, you're facing more shots, and you're maybe going to look better. And he's just not. That's two different managers now, and not one of them have wanted to make him the starting goalkeeper. And I think that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think goalkeeper is going to be something that will kind of escalate in the next couple of weeks. I don't think Joe Hart had a bad game on Sunday, but there are moments when you're saying to yourself, he's not a Brendan Rodgers goalkeeper. And I know that's maybe disrespectful. I think Joe Hart has been very, very good in his 2 seasons at Celtic. I think we spoke about it first episode, with the way the goalkeeping situation was when Barkas, who by the way, I don't know if you've seen this, how good a game did he have against PSV the other night?
Yeah, I saw that save.
What a performance.
Destined to go for goal.
Yeah, he put in a really good display actually. But one thing that Barkas wasn't good with at shot stopping. Joe Hart came in and really solved that problem. But Celtic are a club that are progressing, and Joe Hart wasn't coming in to be a long-term option, and we've spoken about that a lot in this show. Celtic need to sort the goalkeeping position out now. Joe Hart, I think, will be one that will stay and try and fight for his place, but I'll be astonished if Celtic don't try and at least get a proper... It might not be like... I think Celtic have always had a problem with goalkeepers in terms of buying the right ones. I think some of Celtic's best goalkeepers have been players like a Fraser Foster, who came in on loan and they obviously made it permanent. Craig Gordon coming in on a free transfer. Spending £7 or £8 million on a goalkeeper is not going to be a perfect... It might not be the solution, but there are goalkeepers out there you need to do investigating. Brendan Rodgers he's always had a good goalkeeper, even when he was at Leicester, Liverpool. He's always been able to have a good goalkeeper beside him. Like Gordon, I thought, kicked on massively under Rodgers. I don't think Hart fits that bill, so I'll be surprised if Celtic aren't in the market in the next 2 weeks to try and get a new kind of, maybe not top class number one, but I certainly think you'll see a real statement.
Goalkeepers.
Yeah,
Rodgers, when you look at what he done to Craig Gordon, he brought in Boris De Vries and he challenged Craig Gordon to win that jersey back. And Gordon did for a season, but even then, after that, Bain was brought in and he displaced him. So I feel like Rodgers is the manager. He's constantly challenging the goalkeeper to be at the top of their game. And does Joe Hart still have that in him? Under Ange last season, he looked good, but I feel like in pre-season, in the first couple of games, he's looked ropey, and it's not just one or two fans saying that. It seems to be quite a number of growing supporters are really feeling that, and it's quite worrying. I have even heard some people saying that they think that Joe Hart could be the difference between winning the league and not. And maybe that is quite dramatic to say, but it's the one area that Celtic, I feel, could really upgrade in Europe to go to the next level, to be honest, because the amount of shots that Celtic face, particularly last season, there was times that maybe Joe Hart could have stopped goals from going in big games against RB Leipzig and stuff, and he looked nervy. Like when you remember that situation, I think it was Soboslai he gave the ball to, and it was worrying. I don't think Rodgers is asking him to do that, actually, to be honest, though. I think Rodgers has actually spoke to him about that, and you've seen Rodgers speaking to him at Aberdeen. I think the message was just to play the ball along. Rodgers isn't as concerned about playing the ball out for the back in a game like that against Aberdeen. He wanted the ball at the pitch. But then that begs the question, where is that physicality up front? So you're really in two different situations where that Joe Hart can't play the ball short, with Celtic having more technical players. And I feel like Celtic are destined to get another goalkeeper in the next few weeks, and I really do hope they do.
I can definitely see them going for a new goalkeeper. But I find last season when he was at Leicester very interesting because, as you remember, he sold Kasper Schmeichel, and Leicester fans and a lot of English fans were like, "What on earth is he doing?" And he didn't go out and spend a replacement. He played Danny Ward, who obviously isn't. I don't think Danny Ward is. Now you can argue if that's worked or not because Leicester obviously ended up going down, but he's not one that he won't go out and spend a lot of money on a goalkeeper if he doesn't have to. But it's going to be very interesting because it's clearly a position that Celtic want to move upwards on. But I don't know if it's going to be like a massive. I don't think we're going to see this £7-8 million. You might see a really good goalkeeper he might be able to pluck, and like he did with Doris de Vries. Now Doris de Vries obviously didn't work out, and I think he's done it in the past when he was at Liverpool. I can't remember I'm going out and spending a lot of money on a goalkeeper, but it's never been an issue with Brendan Rodgers. But it's got the potential to be one. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes with somebody he knows and they make such a difference. But it's a player who can be a 4 or 5 year solution to that.
I feel like when you look at the best sides in world football, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man City, the second that they bought a goalkeeper, they immediately improved as a side.
Yeah.
When you're looking at a lot of teams, even last season in the Champions League, Club Brugge done excellent, and I would say that was mostly due to Simon Mignolet. When you look at a club like Club Brugge, they have Mignolet in goals. He wasn't always the best goalkeeper for Liverpool, but he was excellent last season in the Champions League, and that really can be the difference with a player like that in the Celtic side, because it's just going to bring a calmness when Celtic are facing so many shots that defenders know this goalkeeper's capable of pulling off excellent saves. And it will be tough to even get a goalkeeper to replicate what Fraser Foster done in Europe, but they need that this season, I believe.
Yeah, I think they do as well. Let's wrap up with talking about the big game on Sunday. Celtic go to Kilmarnock. They will face a big challenge at Rugby Park with a plastic pitch. It's going to be a big League Cup encounter. It's obviously one that Celtic are eager to defend. It's Brendan Rodgers has got a flawless trophy record. It's one that he's going to want to keep going. Give us a prediction. How do we see Sunday going? Do you think there'll be changes in the team? Do you think he'll?
Yeah. I don't think Carter Vickers will play at all. I don't think there's any chance of that.
That's a massive risk.
An injury on that pitch. Stephen Welsh will probably be brought in. There might be changes. It's really hard to say because at times Ange just played the same 11 no matter the competition. Whereas Rodgers as a manager, I feel could maybe make some changes. Catty, I don't know how the injury's looking with him. It's quite worrying. Kyogo, I think, will play. You might see changes in the midfield, but I think O'Reilly will play. It's quite a tough game to analyse.
I think you'll see.
Could you see Bernabé? That's the question I'm wondering.
Yeah, I wouldn't be over surprised if Awata comes in maybe at right back. Wouldn't be over surprised if I seen that. You might see Nawrocki and Welsh. I think that'll be a back pairing. Home, I think, will play maybe Kwon. I think they could maybe put him in. I know he didn't. I don't know, but he wasn't in the bench. I don't know. He might. I wouldn't be surprised.
McGregor will play, to be honest. I do think though, because he just plays almost every game. It's unbelievable.
Forrest will play. I think he'll put Yang in, and I think Kyogo. I think he'll use this as a good opportunity. But again, it's going to be very, very interesting. Give us a score prediction.
My heart's saying 3-1 Celtic.
I think 3-1 as well. I think it could be a really interesting game. We're going to wrap up there, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy your holiday, you jammy person.
Thanks a lot for having me, Scott.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you very much. And we're going to have weekly content coming out. So tune in. We're going to have a piece going out on Wednesday. We'll have the latest part of Ranked. We're going to look at Neil Lennon signings. And we'll have a new episode next week to cover the Kilmarnock game. So thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you soon. Cheers.